No one ever said her name out loud. The moment it was spoken, machines hesitated, corridors fell silent, and even the bravest alien males suddenly found something else to look at. Her power was so immense that fearing her had become an instinct. Until one day, a human arrived and broke the galaxy's unspoken agreement. He didn't flinch. He didn't bow. He smiled. And with that single, effortless smile, the universe began to realize it had been wrong for a very long time. The station had learned to breathe around her. Doors delayed their opening by a fraction of a second when she approached, as if clearing their throats. Lights dimmed politely, then corrected themselves. Somewhere deep in the core, a stabilizer hummed a little louder, like a nervous animal pretending not to be nervous. She noticed all of it, because she always did, and because pretending not to notice took more effort than letting the universe quietly flinch. She walked alone, as usual. Her footsteps echoed longer than they should have. That was not architecture, that was caution. Beings moved aside without appearing to move, conversations folding into silence like embarrassed thoughts. A pair of armored males from a species famous for ritual dominance suddenly found the ceiling fascinating. Another pretended to receive a transmission from his wrist console, nodding gravely at nothing. She did not blame them. Fear, after all, was the most efficient language in the galaxy. Her reflection slid across a polished wall panel, distorted by curvature and faint energy fields. Human, anyone would say if they weren't looking closely. Human proportions, human symmetry, human softness. Only the ears gave her away, long and tapering back with a grace that no human evolution had bothered with. They twitched once, betraying irritation, then stilled. Control was important. Control was everything. She had been taught that before she had been taught numbers. A maintenance drone drifted too close. It froze midair, system stuttering, then backed away as if it had suddenly remembered a childhood trauma. She sighed and the sigh carried weight. Somewhere a sensor recalibrated itself in apology. She reached the transit hub and waited, hands folded, posture precise. Waiting was safer than moving. Waiting gave others time to escape. That was when the human arrived. He came in loudly, which already set him apart. Not loud in volume, but in presence, like someone who had never learned to apologize for existing. His boots scuffed the floor. His jacket was patched with symbols that meant absolutely nothing to anyone but him, and he was arguing cheerfully with the station's arrival interface. "I'm just saying," he said. "If you know my name, my ship's serial number, and the fact that I snore, you can probably let me through without the lecture." The interface replied with patient authority. He ignored it. She felt him before she looked at him. Not power. He had none worth measuring, but density, emotional gravity, the irritating kind that pulled attention whether you wanted it or not. He turned, finally noticed the sudden absence of everyone else, and then noticed her. For one long, precarious moment, the station held its breath. "Oh," he said, blinking once. His gaze flicked to her ears, then back to her face. Cool ears. That was it. No flinch. No dominance display. No fear-response pheromones spiking the air. Just appreciation. Mild, unguarded, and entirely inappropriate. A nearby warning glyph flickered uncertainly, then turned itself off. She did not respond. She waited for the second reaction, the delayed one, the moment when understanding arrived and terror followed. It always did. It didn't. He smiled at her. Not the sharp, challenging smile used by predators, not the deferential curve of the afraid. Just a smile, easy and unremarkable, as if she were a fellow traveler and not the reason half the station had emergency evacuation drills named after her. "First time here," he continued, gesturing vaguely at the hub. "Does it always feel like this place is judging you?" Her ears twitched again. "You should leave," she said, "because that was the script, because it was safer, because it always worked." He considered this. Is there a reason, or is this more of a general lifestyle recommendation? There it was. Humor. Casual, unarmored humor, tossed directly into a situation that usually collapsed under its own tension. She felt something shift, subtle but real, like a lock loosening that had never been meant to open. "I am dangerous," she said. Honesty then. That was also safer. "Yeah," he nodded, glancing around at the empty space. "I gathered. Whole place feels like it's one bad thought away from running away screaming." That would be accurate. He looked back at her, really looked this time, eyes thoughtful rather than assessing. "You don't seem dangerous, you seem tired." No one had ever said that to her before. A transit car arrived with unnecessary haste. Its doors opened wide, inviting her in with the enthusiasm of something hoping compliance would prevent catastrophe. She stepped inside. The human followed without hesitation. The doors slid shut. Somewhere an administrator fainted. They stood in silence as the car accelerated, stars streaking past the transparent wall. She waited for fear. She waited for him to realize his mistake. She waited for the universe to correct this error. "So," he said eventually, leaning against the rail, "do the ears help with balance, or is it more of a sensory thing?" She stared at him. "You are not afraid." He shrugged. "I mean, I've been afraid, just not of you." That is statistically improbable. Humans are big fans of that. The car slowed. She felt the station relax slightly, recalibrating expectations, rewriting a few emergency scenarios. For the first time in a very long while, she found herself doing something reckless. She laughed. It came out softer than she expected, unfamiliar in her own chest. The sound rippled outward, gentle but potent, and a light panel flickered in surprise. He grinned wider. "Okay, now that's dangerous." When the doors opened, people pretended not to stare, pretended not to see the impossible sight of her stepping out beside a human who was still alive, still smiling, still very much unconcerned. She did not tell him her name. He did not ask. They walked together anyway, and for the first time since her power had outgrown the galaxy's comfort, she did not feel like a disaster waiting to happen. She felt, impossibly, like a person. The station stopped, pretending nothing unusual was happening about 12 hours later. This was not because of alarms or explosions. Those would have been easier to explain. It was because the human was still there, still alive, and still walking beside her. Like proximity to annihilation was a casual preference rather than a terminal mistake. They had reached one of the quieter observation corridors, the kind designed for contemplation, diplomacy, or discreet existential dread. Stars slid past in slow, dignified arcs. The glass was reinforced with layers of transparent alloys and fields that could survive minor wars. She stood near it, hands folded again, posture returning out of habit. He leaned against the glass anyway. "You know," he said, "this view really loses something when everyone's too scared to enjoy it." "You should not lean there," she replied. "The field occasionally destabilizes." He looked down at his boots. "Destabilizes how?" She considered. "Last time, it inverted local gravity for 3 seconds." "Oh, that's fine then." "That is not." He pushed off the glass just as the field flickered. For a brief moment, his hair lifted as if greeting the ceiling, then settled. He laughed, delighted. "See, free entertainment." She stared. The field stabilized instantly, as if embarrassed. "You adjust reality," he added. "I annoy it, fair trade." They walked on. She had begun to notice things about him that defied simple explanation. Not power, never that, but endurance. He had asked her questions that others would never dare, trivial questions, curious ones. What she ate, whether her ears were sensitive to music, if she slept, and if so, whether she dreamed in colors humans didn't have names for. She answered some, avoided others. "Everyone else avoids me," she said finally. "They believe proximity will provoke an incident." "And you're worried it might," he replied. "Yes." "Any chance you can narrow that down to a percentage? I like to know my odds." She paused. "With most beings, 73%. He nodded solemnly. "With me." She hesitated longer. The station noticed, systems hovering in readiness. Undetermined. "Nice," he said. "I love mystery." They entered a communal module that had been cleared in advance, though no one admitted doing the clearing. Tables stood empty, chairs carefully spaced as if social distance could be enforced by furniture. An automated dispenser activated the moment she stepped inside, offering refreshments with desperate enthusiasm. The human studied the options. Do you know what half of these are? No. Excellent dealer's choice. He selected something luminous and blue. It hissed softly, then attempted to crawl out of its container. She raised an eyebrow. Ah, he said. That's new. The drink froze mid-escape, then retreated, sulking. You should not antagonize unknown substances, she said. He sipped it anyway, coughed. Tastes like regret. She felt the corner of her mouth lift before she could stop it. They sat. The chairs adjusted themselves cautiously. For the first time in years, she sat across from someone rather than alone. I was trained, she said, words emerging without the usual internal resistance, to limit interaction. Emotional variance increases output volatility. Makes sense, he replied. Humans tried that once, didn't stick. Why? We're bad at following rules that make us lonely. The word lingered between them. Lonely. She had many words for isolation, clinical and precise, but none that felt like that. A drone passed by, then passed again, clearly spying. He waved at it. It retreated at speed. You don't act like others, she said. Yeah, he smiled. They tell me that a lot, usually right before paperwork. She studied him, really studied him, the way she might study a variable that refused to stabilize. His presence didn't suppress her power or provoke it. It simply existed alongside it. The station's systems adjusted, recalibrated, learned. What do you see when you look at me? She asked quietly. He didn't answer immediately. He tapped the table, thinking. Someone who's been told their whole life that strength means isolation. Someone who's tired of being a cautionary tale. Her ears tilted back, vulnerable. And, he added, someone with excellent ears. She laughed again, sharper this time, and the lights flickered in applause. Somewhere far above them, administrators rewrote protocols. Somewhere even farther, sensors detected a shift, a statistical anomaly forming around one human and one alien woman who should not have been sitting together, sharing bad drinks and worse jokes. She felt it too. A subtle change, like a door opening where there had never been a door before. For the first time, she wondered what might happen if she didn't close it. The first warning arrived as a polite request. It appeared on every surface at once, text and symbol braided together in a dozen galactic standards, accompanied by a tone designed to soothe prey animals and irritate predators. She felt it before she read it, a tightening in the fabric of probability, a familiar pressure that meant powerful beings had begun making decisions about her without consulting her. External delegation en route, the message announced. Please remain stationary. Compliance is appreciated. He read it upside down from where he was reclining on a bench that had long since given up trying to eject him. That sounds ominous. It is, she said. They have found me. They always do. Yes. He swung his legs down and stood, stretching like this was merely an inconvenient meeting rather than the prelude to catastrophe. Okay. On the bright side, at least they asked nicely. They will not remain polite. Yeah, I figured that was more of a suggestion than a vibe. The station reacted immediately. Bulkheads shifted. Fields strengthened. Somewhere deep within its core, ancient defense systems woke reluctantly, like retirees being asked to cover one last shift. She felt the familiar urge to withdraw, to isolate herself before others were harmed by proximity, by choice, by accident. She took a step back. He noticed. Of course he did. Hey, he said, not loudly, not urgently. Just enough to anchor her. You don't have to do the disappearing act. You do not understand, she replied. If they provoke me, you could tear the station in half, rewrite local physics, and accidentally invent 3 new religions. Yeah. You mentioned. That is not humorous. True, he agreed, but you are. Her ears angled toward him despite herself. The delegation arrived in silence. ships slipping into position with the smooth confidence of entities accustomed to being obeyed. They projected themselves into the station's central concourse, towering forms wrapped in authority fields and ceremonial menace. Alien males, all of them, built like threats given legal standing. They did not look at him. They looked at her with calculation, fear masked as procedure. "You are required to submit," one intoned. "Your uncontrolled interactions have triggered unacceptable probability deviations." He leaned toward her. "Unacceptable probability deviations sounds like my search history." "Human," another delegate snapped, finally acknowledging him. "You are irrelevant." He smiled pleasantly. "That's what my last boss said too." The station trembled as pressure built. She felt it rising in her chest, that familiar storm, the thing she had spent her life containing. Once she would have folded inward, obeyed, removed herself for the sake of others. She didn't. She breathed. The human stepped forward before she could stop him, hands visible, posture relaxed in a way that made several weapons systems hesitate out of sheer confusion. "You're afraid of her," he said conversationally. "I get it. She's impressive. But you've spent so long treating her like a disaster that you never bothered to ask who she is." "That is irrelevant," the delegate replied. "No," the human said gently, "that's the whole problem." She felt it then, clearly, unmistakably. Not a surge of power, but a shift in alignment. Her strength was still there, vast and patient, but it was no longer braced against the universe. It was steady. "I am not unstable," she said, her voice carrying without force. "I was isolated." The delegates recoiled as systems flickered, not violently, but decisively, like reality choosing a side. "I choose," she continued, "how my power is expressed." The station responded, fields harmonizing with her presence rather than resisting it. The human glanced around, impressed. "Huh, it's like the place finally realized you're not the problem." Silence stretched. The delegates recalculated, authority eroding in the face of an outcome they had never modeled, cooperation. "You have changed," one said. "Yes," she replied. Her ears tilted forward, not in aggression but in confidence. "I have." They withdrew soon after, not defeated, but outpaced by a truth they could not control. Their ships vanished, leaving behind a station that felt lighter, freer, as if a long-held breath had finally been released. Later, much later, she stood at the observation window again. Stars drifted past, indifferent and beautiful. "So," he said, leaning beside her, "does this mean you're still dangerous?" She smiled, small and genuine. "Yes." "Cool," he grinned, "just checking." She looked at him, this improbable human who had never tried to dominate or flee,